Hi again. We're back to this cube, which is starting out to be looking a bit like a Lego box, but we have one problem with it, which is that think about how this would fit together. I made the thickness of the plastic box 3 millimeters, and I can prove that to you if I go and I click Evaluate, and Evaluate has a bunch of tools up here. One of them is Measure, and if I select this edge in yellow and left click, and this edge and left click, tells me that distance is 3 millimeters. So that's the thickness that I created, and that's good because that's what I specified in the shell command. If I click Escape, I get out of the measure. Now, if I look again at the top of it, and think about how these are going to stack together, if I select that edge and that edge, it gives me the center distance is 10 millimeters. That's not very helpful. But the distance to this base is going to not be that. Sometimes I find the Measure tool gives me different results. So if I click point to point, that's better. That's told me that's 5 millimeters, which is bigger than the 3 millimeters here. So that means that these won't click together. They'll be loose in between. So that won't work very well as a Lego block, which means I have to go back and edit the sketch that was here. I'm going to go back in to that sketch. I'm going to go up to the view orientation and I'm going to look at it end on, and you can see what comes back are the geometry bits that I defined when I made this sketch. So I need to go through and change some of these things. Well, first of all, I'm going to delete that dimension, and I'm going to delete that dimension, and that one, and that one. Recall I still have these little green indicators of the relationships between the circles. So if I move one, the others move as well. If I move this one, whoops, if I move this one, the others move. So the relationship stayed the same, but the dimensions that I put in were different. Oh, I made that dimension non-driving, so get rid of that too. So what I really want is I want to have the perimeter of this circle to be 3 millimeters from here. Unfortunately, it's not easy to select perimeters of things. I don't know why. I end up getting frustrated by it all the time, and then I just end up doing the math. So if I select this center to this part, and I say, well, I made those circles 10 millimeters, so that means the radius is 5 millimeters. And I want it to be 3 millimeters from the side. That means I should make this dimension 8. Now I also therefore need to make this dimension to there 8. And I want to make this dimension to there 8. And I want to make this dimension to there 8. As long as I haven't changed the fundamental geometry of the part by moving things around, you can move things around to your heart's content. It really doesn't make much difference to the model itself. If I tried to move this part off the square, then the rest of the model that's built after this would complain. That's one of the downsides of history-based modeling that we're using. But that's what it is. But basically I've gone in and I've changed this so that now when I complete the part, you can see I've moved those nubs out, and if I measure point to point from here to here, I get 3 millimeters. Problem solved. So now I've got nubs that will fit together. I've got a hollow shell that looks reasonable. There's some things about this hollow shell that aren't realistic though. One of them is, have you ever tried to make something out of Play-Doh or out of wood or anything and get internal corners to be perfectly sharp? It's not easy to do. These edges are a problem. Well, we can go back into features and we can actually make them more realistic. And in fact, in terms of product design and part design, internal corners are a nightmare because they cause stress concentrations and they weaken things. So not only is this part that we've built here impossible to make because of the sharp corners, but if we could make it, it would end up in plastic anyway, or in metal. It would end up being much more weak than it needed to be because of sharp concentrations of stress. So I'm going to pick this fillet tool and I'm going to select, let's see, I have a 40 millimeter piece. I'm going to make that, a 3 millimeter radius, fillet radius. And if I now go around and I select these edges, click full preview, these edges. Now it's showing me in yellow what it will make the part like. So that's a much smoother inside corner. I could also pick that edge, but you know, that's probably a bit overkill. I think that edge could be sharp. So you'll see on the left in the items to fillet, that was the last thing I picked, edge 5. If I just delete that, then it's back to what I was intending, and then I can adjust the fillet dimensions on the fly. I can make that 2. Oops, thought it was 200 and it can't do it. 2 millimeters, or whatever you think that the inside radius needs to be. Now I've created a part that looks a bit more realistic that we could make it. That's pretty good. Notice, however, that there's also inside corners here. Well, if we change those, we're going to have a problem with the whole thing fitting together. But we've also got these sharp edges on the outer corners. Another one of the things that makes parts kind of really realistic is outer corners and how you deal with them. We could fillet them like we just did. I'm going to use something else called a chamfer. And I'm going to make my chamfer not 10 millimeters. I'm going to make it fairly small. I'm going to make it 0.5 millimeters. And the same as the fillet that I just did on the inside, I can select the edge. I could select the whole face. Excuse me. In this case, I've selected the whole face. And so now what you see is all of the outer edges and the inner edges are now filleted, as I've just shown. Maybe I want to do the top ones as well. There. And I have a part now that has rounded insides. It has outsides that are no longer going to cut somebody because they're so infinitely sharp, because remember, we're working in an ideal world, but we're going to make a real part someday. And I've got this finished part. I'm not really crazy about this fillet, this chamfer here. I think that is, while it maybe makes it easier to make, it's going to make it so our part won't actually snap together properly. So I'm actually going to go and change that. Like everything else, I'm going to go left click on the thing I just made, click edit feature, and I'm going to simply go in here and remove those edges. Oops. The challenge is to find which one of the edges I'm removing. wasn't. And if you click around individually with each of them, eventually you'll find which one it is. Oh, it was that first face. I'm going to delete that. And now all the rest of them are retained. And so now I've got the part, same as before. It's got the edges are nicely chamfered off. The top of the nubs are chamfered off. The bottom of the nubs are sharp corners. And I've saved it. I'm going to save it again as 4-block. And that's it for now. See you with the next version of this.